Well, when we first spoke, we talked some about you getting started in music. But I don't think I asked, what were some of the first pieces of music that actually got you not necessarily interested in composing, but just music as a whole? Is there anything from your child days that you remember really having an impact on you that you still think about or anything like that?
Sure, you want me to date myself now, is what you're
Well,
saying.
hey, I mean,
There, let me think. There were two things that really, well, there were three things that really got me. The first one, I don't remember how old I was, but when E.T. was in theaters, so most people are going to think, well, it doesn't matter. That was in the 1900s. In the 1900s, when E.T. came out, the first, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes of film, and then the last 5 or 6 minutes of film were just all music, scored to picture just really tightly, and the music was incredible. It's still one of my favorite soundtracks. And I remember being transported by that music and not thinking I want to do that, but I think that's really cool was what I really thought. And then I thought that I wanted to be a band director because my band director in high school was really inspirational and a huge part of my love and passion for music, and I'm still friends with him today. We see each other probably every other week. He's only a little bit older than I am. He was just getting started when he was teaching us. And then in college, as a music major, Danny Elfman put out a CD called, I'm again dating myself, a CD, an album called Music for a Darkened Theater. I think
mhm.
he's done two or three of them now, but this was just called Music for a Darkened Theater. And it was sort of the themes and a couple of highlights from a bunch of different films back in this was the mid 90s, so it's like Beetlejuice and Batman and Edward Scissorhands, and I'd never really thought about anything but teaching and like composing in a collegiate environment, even though I loved film so much. And that sort of combined with my previous ET experience, and then building on that, of course, all the other famous John Williams things, Jurassic Park and Raiders of the Lost Ark and Close Encounters and Jaws and everything else, I decided to switch over to film to composition instead of teaching in school. And then that led into film and TV, which also ended up leading into games. And yeah, that was the beginning of the end. Here I am,
Yeah.
25 years later or something.
Yeah. Well, now jumping all the way back to the present here, so you have some new games. So the first one I wanted to ask you about was Still Wakes the Deep, which
Mm-hmm.
is this it's kind of this one of those kind of random games where it's like I would never myself think of this story as being something that would be a game, but it's great. You know, it's set on
Right.
this oil rig and it's like psychological horror and it's about kind of stealth and you know, you encounter these fantastical things. So what was the process of getting involved with that and finding the right sound? Because it's not necessarily a like blockbuster action heavy game. You know, it's more
Right.
kind of quiet. So what was the balance of, let's say, going from games you've done like Tomb Raider or Far Cry to doing a
Mm-hmm.
smaller, more small scale game?
It was interesting because I love Chinese Room, and they've done a lot of walking simulators, is what they're called sometimes. So it's more of an exploratory walking around a town, picking up notes, figuring out maybe what happened, kind of a detective-ish sort of mystery thing. And when they contacted me, I was thrilled because I love them. And I thought, oh, I just assumed they were doing something along those lines. And when I spoke to them, they said that it was a horror game. And at first, my initial reaction was kind of like, great, because I really wanted to work with them. But I was looking forward to not doing a horror game with them.
Hmm.
And they did Amnesia. That was one of the first games that I became aware of Chinese Room. And I wasn't going to turn it down or anything like that. I just thought, well, maybe they'll have an interesting take on it, and they completely did. I got to write some wonderful non-horror music as well, and it's not a shooter, or you don't even have a weapon. Your basic job is to run away in the game, which I really like. And the heart of the game lies in the fact that, very much like a movie would play out, before this inciting incident occurs, you're really getting to know through your character in the game. You're getting to know the crew, and the voice acting is just phenomenal. So it's all casual. It takes place off the coast of Scotland. Everyone's authentic Scottish, so it's just this real thick brogue, and you need to have subtitles on most of the time to hear what they're saying. And even then, you're what do those words mean? I don't know. I'm not Scottish, but it's fantastic, and I love it. So once things start going awry, you're connected to all these people, and slowly but surely everything just starts shifting from bad to worse. And I always really enjoyed having conversations with the audio team, because we always talked about, number one, where not to have any music, which is always important to me. They didn't want to blanket it in music. Number two, where could we put the not scary music? And that was actually our first kind of target, was which parts of the game need not scary music, and then which parts of the game do we want to be the opposite and put the scary music in. And then, oh yeah, what instruments are we going to use to record all of this music? And it was really exciting, because they were really open to anything, and they would suggest one thing and I would sort of one up them and suggest something else, and they would say, well, maybe we could do this, and I'd say, well, maybe we could do that. And that's what ended up generating the sound of the final score.
Well, for figuring out what instruments to use, are you typically, is that a conversation you have with the developers, the sound people of the game, or is that something that you bring yourself? Like, hey, I'm thinking about using this, or is it different? Maybe sometimes them, sometimes you.
It's normally a collaborative effort, and it's just a matter of the different developers, really. Sometimes a developer will just say, we really have no idea, but we love this game and this game and this game, and how you made the music so unique and identifiable with those IPs. So we would love for you to do the same thing with ours. What are your thoughts? Other times, and Still Wakes the Deep was a sort of a halfway in between, the audio director suggested doing some metal kinds of sounds in the music, because it takes place on an oil rig, forgot to mention that, in the 1970s, off the coast of Scotland in the North Sea. So the sea is very treacherous, the oil rig, lots of pressure and machinery, very treacherous, very metal, very reverberant, and Dan thought it would be interesting to write a score that sort of crossed the line between, is that music playing, or is that the oil rig? And usually if it's got a recurring sort of rhythm, you sort of think, oh, okay, that's the score. But then other times the oil rig's got engines and things that recur in a normal way as well, and it turns out that it's the rig. So it was a real nice opportunity to not feel like I was being guardrailed creatively, because that was his main suggestion. Everything else, he said, well, what do you think we should use? And I would pitch out ideas, and sometimes I thought they wouldn't be good ideas, and he would say, I love that idea. So we'd move forward with that. It's nice having a collaborator who lets you sort of put your foot in your mouth a little bit. I don't know, maybe we should try this, maybe we should try that. And he'd say, that second one sounds really interesting, because he's got a lot more insight to the game than I do. And that's the reason the whole score came about. He was very suggestive, but also supportive. And I know they weren't just saying yes all the time, because on a very rare occasion, he would say, this one thing might not really work. It sounds too close to something else, and we would tweak something. But that happened twice. Most of the time, we're always on the same page, and it's just so wonderful to speak with them, because it's like a big high five team meeting all the time, because I'm always telling them what a great job they're doing, and they're telling me the same thing, and yeah, they're great guys to work with.
Yeah, and I do like what you're saying, and it goes in along with movies and TV too, but with video games as well, as how there can be great scores that you don't even realize that it's the score. It can kind of mesh with the sound design, because it doesn't always have to be huge orchestral stuff. It can be just stuff that simply blends in with the landscape, but effectively so.
Totally. And that's something that they were very sensitive to. They wanted it to be immersive, but they also wanted to be able to call attention to it when the time was right. So it's, I don't know, 4 hours. It's a small game company, so it's a shorter game, but it's really about the quality, not the quantity. I think there's 3.5 or 4 hours of gameplay, and about a quarter of that in terms of music, maybe an hour and a half of music, so a third of it with music, and not a whole lot of copying and reusing the same pieces. Maybe half the game has music, but to compare, a bigger game, like a big AAA game, might be for single player mode, might be 12 or 15 hours of gameplay, and they've got maybe an hour or two of original score. So your score to your gameplay ratio is incredibly wide. Where with this one, we had proper coverage, and almost all the scenes in the game were recorded and written specifically for that scene. You know, not copy and pasted and moved around just to get coverage, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, another game that has come out recently was No Rest for the Wicked, which is very different. You know, it's like this fantasy role-playing game, and a big departure in a lot of ways. And that album has like about 50 tracks about. So that's, if you look at that compared to Still Wakes the Deep, it's, vastly different. So is the quantity of tracks a challenge? Like, or is it length? I mean, is it trying to handle a bigger game? How does your process differ from something like that as opposed to Still Wakes the Deep?
We had more runway on Still Wakes the Deep. If I remember correctly, they contacted me towards the beginning of the year. I'm not going to say which year because now I don't really remember, because I feel like it's still 2023. But they contacted me maybe in April or May, and we wrapped the game up by the end of the year. And a lot of that was waiting, because we all agreed that we wanted to wait until the gameplay came online so I could see what I was scoring. And they were doing the sound effects, so sound effects would affect the music, music would affect the sound effects as we were creating it. It was a really collaborative experience. No Rest for the Wicked, which it's still in early access. That's what I was brought on for, was their early access launch, which I think was about 3 months after Chinese Room released Still Wakes the Deep. And I pretty much pivoted from Still Wakes the Deep. They overlapped a little bit because we had a launch trailer for No Rest for the Wicked that I scored. But I pivoted from Still Wakes the Deep to No Rest for the Wicked almost immediately. And it was about half the development time. We had essentially 3 months for about 3 times as much music. It's about 3.5 hours of score for the early access. But that's because it's an open world game and you can kind of do anything. So they just needed a lot of coverage, and they had a lot of characters with a lot of fantastic story, and I had a lot of themes for the characters that we had in cinematics and in gameplay, and it was just a very compressed schedule. But man, do I ever love writing fantasy orchestra music. So I really, really enjoyed it. I came up with a bunch of themes beforehand for characters and situations and locations, and then just spun out the music probably 10 or 15 minutes a week. And this was me working on it in the studio, getting some soloists to record on it, putting it in the game. From January until March, essentially. So it was very quick, but also so much fun to write.
Yeah. How typically, I know it will change. How much time typically do you have to make music for a single game? Like what's typically the turnaround if you had to put an average to it?
Sure. I would say most developers nowadays like getting composers involved early, which is nice, because even if there's no music to write, it's wonderful to be introduced to the world and sort of let yourself ruminate on it and think about it for a month or two, and then, oh, well, maybe we could write a main theme or something. It's a lot more expansive, and it's not as compressed as the schedule for No Rest for the Wicked was. So if I say 18 months to 24 months is a normal develop time for a game score, that's not writing, especially the way I wrote for No Rest for the Wicked. It's more writing 5 or 10 minutes here, it gets put in the game, we play the game, we experiment, we tweak a few things, or everyone likes it and we don't. A couple of months go by, another 5 to 10 minutes, because I like to work in parallel with the game so that I'm not just writing blind. Even with Still Wakes the Deep, it was maybe an hour and a half of music, but I think we had 9 months for that. And some other games, like Dead Space, that was almost 3 years, but that's because they started from scratch. I was on board from the beginning, and we were cultivating the idea of the game and the emotions we wanted to elicit from the game and what the music should do with those emotions over that entire period.
And are there, because I am curious, are there ever like demo tracks? Like, are you sending like little bits and then they send you comments back? Or is it usually you send the final product to them and that's what's used?
It's usually a little bit of both. If it's a shorter cue, maybe a cinematic or something like that, I'll probably pull out all the stops and do the whole thing so that you get a good representation of what the cinematic or maybe a main theme is going to sound like. For in-game music, it's usually, I try to do a big swing and represent the music the way it's going to be in the game. But let's say for a boss battle, we need to have 6 minutes of music. I might not do all 6 minutes. I might do a minute and a half or 2 minutes, just completely sussed out and complete, and it's going to loop and it's going to be a little repetitive, but that way everybody can hear it, get a feel for it in the game, either get the old music that was in there temporarily or the fact that there was no music in there, kind of let people's brain refresh and purge their previous experiences. And that usually works pretty well. And then I can just build on that track, revisit it a little bit later, improve what I want, expand it, extend it. And normally, and I've done live orchestra at Sony and Fox back in the day, and Abbey Road and Air Studios and all the places. But No Rest for the Wicked is the first time I've done a big orchestral score in 3 or 4 years, I think. Just because I was working on games that required smaller music, and we didn't have the time to do a live recording. I mean, that much music in that little time. It would take that long just to record the music, let alone write it. So I was producing everything here in the studio, which is what I normally do with the smaller ensembles too. So it gives me the flexibility to do those sort of staged deliveries like I was just mentioning, because I'm either doing it all myself and recording things that I have around here, instruments or synthesizers, or I've got some select musicians all around the world that also record themselves at home, and I can get them to play and sort of fly the parts in so it sounds like maybe a 4 or 5 piece ensemble playing with me doing another 10 tracks, but it's really just 3 of us. It's just one of us is in Sweden, one of us is in Nashville, and the rest of us are right here.
I mean, that's the beauty of music, or of technology.
Technology, yep.
Yeah. And now this is kind of a cheesy question, but with
good.
You having done this for so long, are there any big lessons, any kind of things learned from either mistakes or just from long-term experience that as a composer that you now think of? Because I was talking to recently the composer Jeff Russo, who worked on a lot of the Star Trek shows on Paramount Plus, and he was saying one of the biggest things for him was knowing when to quit at a certain point in the day. So he said, like, if I'm working past like 11, everything I make after that is just like not good. And so he knows, like, if I'm still working at 3 a.m, for him specifically, not everyone, but just for him, it's not going to be as good as if he just quit at like 10 in the morning, or it quit 10 in the evening.
10 at night.
Yeah. Like, is there anything that you think of that you kind of have carried over the years?
Absolutely. It's more or less the same thing, but probably not quite the extensive hours. Once I turned 40, pretty much, I couldn't pull all-nighters anymore. My brain would shut down. And then a few years after that, if I worked a bunch of nights in a row, or if I worked weekends, let's say, I would be worthless the following week. And I've found that my best balance, creatively speaking, and schedule-wise, is to have a fairly regular, 8 a.m. to 6 o'clock at night, maybe 10 or 11 hour workday, Monday through Friday. But that's breaking for dinner, no work at night, off on the weekends, and that way I come back fully recharged on Monday and I'm able to knock out a lot more music as opposed to working, maybe getting an extra 8 or 10 hours in the evenings that week. I'm going to lose that time the following week. I'm just going to be sitting there thinking that everything sounds terrible and why am I here? Because I'm tired, right? My brain's not refreshed. And normally it's firing on all cylinders, right? It's just getting it into the computer. I have a bunch of ideas. I'm producing really, really quickly and efficiently, not if I'm tired.
Yeah. No, I feel that. And do you find, because I find this with podcasting too, but do you find that on the weekends sometimes your mind is stuck in things? Like, are you someone who like maybe fixates on something about a certain piece of something that you want to work on that you're like not happy with? Is that something that kind of carries over, as just drives you nuts?
It doesn't. I get it, driving you nuts, yes, but it's also just part of. I think it's part of the creative personality, like the artistic personality.
Yeah.
For me, it's less retroactive and more forward thinking. Usually Friday night, I'm listening maybe on some headphones later what I did that week, and usually it's wrapped up, and I'm thinking about what I'm going to be doing the following week. So Saturday's a pretty decent break. Sunday, most of the day, is a good break. But by the time dinner rolls around Sunday night, my brain is tapping me on the shoulder going, you have to go to work tomorrow. And I'm starting to think about what I need to do the next morning in a good way, not in a bad way. So by the time I've gotten up in the morning, and we've got a lot of animals around here, so I've done all my chores and just the morning things, and I hit the studio by about 9, I'm ready to go and pretty much already know what I need to do and have ideas formed and things like that. And that reciprocates through the week. Rinse and repeat until Friday night, take a break, and then Sunday night it all kicks back in again.
Yeah, no, I get that. And when you are on breaks, what's the stuff that you like to do that helps you decompress? Like, what are some go-tos?
Well, I love cooking. And I do that during the week, and anyway, for my family. Because to me, cooking and composing are very, very similar. Even in the way people are listening to your music, they're eating your food. People, my family. I'm not cooking for a restaurant or anything, but the idea of serving like that, I really, really appreciate. But I also love animals. We have a lot of animals. I mean, a lot of animals.
Like how many are we talking? Because I have 3 dogs. So
okay, well we've got 2 dogs and 7 cats and a couple of rabbits and a tortoise, 2 or 3 birds, a couple of ball pythons, a bearded dragon, 6 or 7 chickens.
Wow.
I'm probably forgetting a couple, but
got a whole farm.
Yeah, it is. I think I serve breakfast to 5 separate species in the morning. But going and taking care of them, there's obviously chores that need to be done on a weekly basis, and then on the weekends I'm cleaning things and doing stuff, but it's a nice purge for me. We're out in the woods. I'm in North Carolina, so we're just outside of the big city on about 25 acres of woods, surrounded by farmland. So it's really nice, especially when the weather's nice like this, to get out and work, and it's just a break, really. But I also love watching film, like I always have. I'm sort of a film fanatic, and I've recently, as of last fall, started collecting 4K and researching 4K discs, and that's just a dangerous rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But it's so fun.
Yeah, I've been, because I'm from North Carolina, and
Oh, nice.
I'm from the Raleigh-Durham area.
Oh, well, I'm in Benson, so you probably know where that is.
Yeah. And I, for the longest time, I mean, I buy more digital stuff now just because I'm kind of moving around a little bit, but I have a huge, kind of almost embarrassing collection of like 4Ks, Blu-rays. So I feel the feel the pain there.
Yeah.
Well, getting back to some things, so we're almost out of time, but is there any upcoming projects, anything else that you're working on, anything else recent that you kind of want to plug, anything that comes to mind?
There are lots of upcoming projects that I can't talk about.
Okay.
Let me think. Well, I can say that For anyone who might actually be at the Game Developers Conference next week, I'm giving 2 different talks. One of them is on the music of Still Wakes the Deep, a lot about the sound sculpture that was built for that. Probably 2/3 of the score, the sounds you hear are coming from this small sound sculpture that a friend of mine built that's just all these metal sounds. And we didn't get too much into Still Wakes the Deep, but it was a fascinating process. And I used 2 other musicians around the world who recorded themselves, and that's the whole score. So I'm talking about that, and I'm also doing a talk specifically on rhythm and groove. I'm a drummer, so it's a lot about how rhythm affects things and what you can do with groove and time changes and stuff like that. But we're also going to get some clapping and stomping and rhythm-oriented things. And I've got something that's not usual at all. I've got a couple of musicians that are going to be playing with me. Some of the musicians from Still Wakes the Deep, actually, but this is on the separate talk. So I'm going to be doing percussion, and we're going to have cello and flute, and we're going to be playing a bunch of live music as well.
Cool.
In the panel, which I think is really, really cool. It
That
should
is
be
cool.
a lot of fun.
Yeah. And now where is this taking place?
It's in San Francisco every year in March.
Oh, cool. Cool. That sounds really exciting.
There's a lot of people. I think they get 30-something thousand people there now. It's
Wow.
pretty big.
Yeah. Jason, I think that's about all I have, or I guess we're mainly so out of time because Zoom likes to cut us off at a certain time. But
Yes, it does.
as always, I really appreciate you taking the time. I really love your work. I love the games you've been a part of. So I am really
you.
appreciative, and yeah, I can't wait to see what you do next, and I'll definitely be in contact again sometime soon. Maybe we could chat again about some new things going on.
That sounds fantastic. I appreciate the great questions as always, Henry.
Yeah. All right. Well, take care. I'll talk to you sometime soon. Okay.
Okay, take it easy.
Bye.
Bye-bye.